Hello and welcome to lesson 3 of week 2. In this lesson, we are going to look at error handling in JavaScript. My name is Mildred. Now, error handling is the process of managing mistakes so that a program does not crash when we run the program. In JavaScript, we have different types of errors. We have syntax error, we have runtime error, and then we have logical errors. When we talk about syntax error is when we make mistake in the code structure. For example, if we miss the parentheses when we define a function. When we talk about runtime error is the one that occurs while executing the code. For instance, we are calling a function that is not defined. Then we have a logical error, which we have an error in the way we thought about the code. So maybe it runs, the syntax is correct, everything is correct, but now the logic, it gives us the wrong answer. So maybe we are creating a function to do addition and then it returns something that's subtraction. The answers returned are different, the logic in a problem, or we are doing division by 0, things like that. Alright, so in JavaScript we use the try catch block. So whatever code that might result in an error will be in a block we call try, and when you write try, you put a pair of parentheses, and then within the parentheses you write all of the code that might fail when you run the code. And then you have a catch block, and in this catch block you're going to put what you want to do when this code fails. We'll put a pair of parentheses, and then in this parentheses that we have in the catch block, we'll put the error when we want to call out the error or we want to display the error. So this is the syntax. We have another block we call the finally block, written finally like this, and what happens in this block is that regardless of what happens in the try and the catch, whatever is in the finally will still execute. All right, so let's look at the error properly. Now, we talked about syntax error. Let's say for instance we have let x and then we say equal to and put the semicolon to end the statement, but we don't have the value here, so this will result in a syntax error when we come to our console to see syntax error unexpected token. Okay, so this is a type of error in JavaScript syntax when we do something wrong. Then we'll talk about runtime error is when we have an error like we call an undefined function. For instance, I say console.log and I want to log something in the console that doesn't exist. For instance, I'll call a variable, let's just call this unknown variable. So this is going to result in a runtime error because I'm calling something that is not defined. So this is called reference error here. So this is a runtime error. And then we want to have a logical error where we say let total, let's say let total equal to 10 over 0 like this. So this is going to be a logical error because we'll have infinity, right? Okay, and then I refresh this and then we see infinity problem. All right, so in the try catch block we try to handle errors that occur when we run our program. Let's say I put that infinity problem in a try catch block. So we'll have the try block and then let's do the catch block, right? So write catch, written catch like this, and then in a pair of parentheses we put any variable we'll use and this will represent the error. So we want to do the 0 division error, right? So the infinity problem. So we'll have result is equal to, let's say 10 over 0 like this, and this code might fail, and so we say console.log. We want to have the result logged in the console here. Now we want to call a function that does not exist also here so that it can create an error for a non-existent function. I'll just call this function non-existent function like this, and so I'm calling a function that doesn't exist to cause an error. And so in this catch block now we want to just log in the console what the error is. So I'll say console.log and I'll say error occurred, and then I want to put the error that occurred here. So I can say error occurred like this and then a comma, and then I'll put this E represents the error, so I'll say E.message to get the message from that error like that. Okay, and so when we save this and we go to our console, we can see that it said error occurred, non-existent function is not defined, and then we have another one here, infinity, because we try to send this result here, so we have infinity problem. So you see how we handle the error, telling it what to do to print out message for us, and we can see our message is printed error occurred here, and we printed out what exactly the error is. So this is how we handle error. The program doesn't crash, it just displays the error to the user or to the calling program. Now we have a throw statement that we use to manually create errors. For instance, let's say I want to create a function. Let's create a function here, and I'll call this function divide, and I want this to divide a by b. So the user supplies a, the value of a and b, and then we want it to divide. Now we want to do something and say if the value of b is 0, right, we want something to happen. Now in the next lesson we'll look at conditional statement, but we're going to use conditional statement now before we look at it. So don't bother if you don't understand until in the next lesson. So we have if b is equal to 0, so we're comparing the value of b to 0. If it's equal to 0, we want to generate an error where we say true. We use the true statement to generate error, and then we create an object of the error class. And then when we look at object-oriented programming, you understand how we use this new statement to create an object of inbuilt class that we have. So we have throw error, and then let's say division by 0 is not allowed, like this. And so now you can see how we have handled a potential problem that checks the value the user supplies and says that if that is the case, just throw this error, is not allowed. And if that is not the case, then you want to return a divided by b, like this. Alright, and so you can see how we did the function definition. And now we can have the try block here to say try, and in the try statement let's just log console.log, and what we want to log here is we want to divide. We'll call the function divide, and we want to divide, let's still use 10 and 0. We want to divide by 0 here, so we log it in the console. And in the catch block here, we want to catch. You can put any variable you want. You can say error, you can put error in full spelling, you can put letter of the alphabet. Alright, and so for the catch block we say console.log, and we are going to log the error we want the user to see here. So we can just say error.message if we just want to get the message that JavaScript displays. Okay, so when we go to our console, we can see say division by 0 is not allowed because we threw the error in that function definition here. So that's how we use the throw statements to manually create error. Alright, we talked about the try, catch, and then finally block that runs regardless of what happens in the try and the catch block. Let's create a function that we use to try code. If an error occurs, the catch block handles it, and regardless of what happens, the finally block will always run. So it will go like this, try. So in this try block you put, let's say console.log. Let's try to generate errors here. So let's say console.log, and we'll say trying this code just for us to simulate this, and we'll try to throw an error here, right? So let's say throw new error, and let's throw an error, something went wrong. So let's say something went wrong, right? And then in the catch block we'll say catch and e, and in the pair of curly brace we want to say let's say console.log, and we want to log e.message, right? And then we want this message to say maybe we can even put the text here, I caught the error, like this. And so we say e.message to print out. And then finally we just put a pair of curly brace, and let's log in the console and say I will always run, something like that. All right, so in real world situation you will put things, and one example is when you go to the ATM and you try to withdraw money. Whether you get your money out or not, it will always tell you thank you for banking with us when you try to retrieve your card and leave there. So those are examples of when you have something running regardless of the outcome of that visit to the machine. And so when we refresh here, we can see that all the errors we simulated there. So in the try block we say we should throw something went wrong. In the catch block we want to say I caught the error, and in the finally block we want to say this always runs regardless of what happens, and we see them there simulated. JavaScript has built-in errors, and these are several error objects that we have. We have the general error, what we just saw so far, and then we have reference error, and we've seen an example of reference error when we have invalid reference like undefined variable or undefined function. Those are reference errors. And then we say type error when we have a wrong data type, like we call a number as a function or things like that. Then we have a syntax error, which we have seen where the code has syntax issues. Maybe we write without the curly brace or something like that. Then range error when we have something that is out of range. When we look at arrays, we're going to see how we have range error. And then we have eval error where we will hardly ever have this error, but this is one that will happen when we use the eval function. And so we're going to look deeply at each of these as we build our softwares and as we go deeper. There's a URI error that also occurs when we have a malformed URI function, like when we're using decode URI and the likes. Alright, so let's do an example of a type error. I think we have seen that, but we'll just do that just to solidify the knowledge. So we have try like this, and let's say we want to say null. Null has no data at all, so we want to say null and we want to convert it to uppercase. We are going to look at this when we look at string methods in the coming weeks, but I'm trying to simulate something here. So we'll use catch here, and we want to catch an error, and what we are going to put within the curly brace here will be, let's just log to the console. So let's say console.log, and then we log the name of the error, so we'll say error.name, and also we want to log the message itself, so we'll say console.log. We can do this once on one line, but we're going to look at that later, how we concatenate strings when we look at strings in next week's lesson. Okay, so we make the variable name e, so we use e like that. And so here we expect that this is going to have a type error. We expect that this is going to tell us that the name of the error is type error, and we expect that the message will be that cannot read properties of null or something like that. So when we refresh our page, we have that type error cannot read properties of null, reading to uppercase. So we get exactly what we want to simulate. We can create custom errors, and when we get to object-oriented programming, we'll look at how to extend the error class to create our own error types. For instance, when we want to create an error that extends the error class, and so we have this in our lesson resource that you can go and look at, but we'll go deeply into this so you can have an understanding when we look at object-oriented programming and we look at the classes that we have in JavaScript and see how we can inherit from a class to create our own custom errors. So this is where we end this lesson. In the next lesson, we are going to look at conditional statements in JavaScript. Thank you, and see you in the next lesson.